An owner is an investor. Think of buying a franchise like a 7-Eleven, right? Everyone knows what a 7-Eleven is, right? When does it make revenue? On day one. When is it profitable? On day one. How does one go about starting it? That's a really good question, right? So if you buy a franchise like a 7-Eleven, you're buying an already proven system and process, right? You're buying you're buying into a franchise where they teach you how to run the business so that when you open your doors, you are making money on day one. Think of buying an already established business: car wash, laundromat, landscaping, auto repair. There's a book called Main Street Millionaire by Cody Sanchez. I don't know how many of you have found her on YouTube, but I love watching her stuff. I mean, really interesting stuff. And I recently read her book. But the idea behind her book is that you can get started as a business owner in any of these businesses with no capital. Because so many businesses that are trying to sell are happy to just be able to sell their business, that they're happy to do it with seller financing. Now, the purpose of this talk is not to tell you to go buy a car wash or a laundromat, although that would not necessarily be a bad idea. But we're gonna now turn this back to your law firm. So there's a good shot of me, right? But think of me, right? I'm not a lawyer. I'm a non-lawyer. So if I were to go to Arizona, where there's a sandbox project that allows non-lawyers to be equity owners of a law firm, right? If I were to go to Arizona and start a law firm, who would I hire? Let's see if anybody can guess. And for those of you who saw me do this talk before, you already know the answer, but in chat, tell me, if I start a law firm, I am not a lawyer, I start a law firm, who do I need to hire on day one? Richard. Money answer, Richard. Melissa got it too, right? An attorney. James says a marketer. James, you're not wrong. But I cannot sell my services. I cannot take in a legal client if I don't have a lawyer to produce the work. Right? So if I'm an investor starting a law firm, I'm not an attorney, I would not be approaching it from the lens that all of you are approaching your business. I would not be approaching it from the lens of, okay, I'm going to do the work. I'm not going to do the work because I can't. I'm going to hire somebody who could do the work. Same thing if I bought an accounting practice and I'm not in accounting, or if I bought a doctor's office and I'm not a doctor. Now, these might be bad examples because there's regulations, regulatory things around them. I might not be able to own them, but take I don't know, a tanning salon. I buy a tanning salon. I don't know the first thing about tanning. I'm going to hire somebody who's going to tell people how to lay down in the bed and get tan, right? So the first person I would hire is an attorney. And that should now start to get our wheels spinning. How would I market the services? If I hired an attorney, I was paying $120,000 salary on day one. What would I as an investor do to make sure that that attorney's busy? I'd put up some cash, right? Put up some cash for the marketing. How long would it take me to generate $1 million in revenue? Well, let's put this in perspective. Let's just say that if you have a law firm and you have an attorney on staff, depending on the practice area, okay, the only exception to this challenge right now would be if it's a litigation practice and they're charging hourly. But in any other place where I could charge flat fee, or I could have a mix of flat fee and hourly, an attorney should be generating more than $1 million in revenue if they're fully busy, right? So for me to get to $1 million in revenue is simply how quickly can I get my attorney to be working 6 hours a day productively. because that's what a full-time attorney, that's when a full-time attorney is fully productive, 1,400 hours a year. So let's just say estate planning, right? If I did estate planning, probably 20 clients is all I need a month. Now it's just a math equation. But would you agree that if you were to buy a law firm that's generating $1 million in revenue annually, and let's say it's generating a $200,000 profit, and let's say that you need to pay $400,000 to buy that firm, right? Or $500,000. Would you agree that if you bought that firm, you would be at $1 million in revenue on day one? I think so. So how would I grow that business and increase profitability is the question that you need to ask yourself if you're buying a firm. It doesn't have to be at $1 million, but if it's an established firm, then you can build on the previous owner's work. How long would it take me to generate $1 million in personal income? So I told you 30% is the threshold of healthy profit. This is a math equation, right? Do $1 million divided by 0.3. And what you come up with, between $3 and $4 million in revenue, that's what it's going to take to have $1 million in personal income. We can get into the tax conversation and we can increase that, right? So make it $5 million if you want $1 million after tax.